Hello everybody and welcome to Legal Studies Unit 4, Area of Study 2, The People, the Parliament and the Courts Part 1. The focus of today's video is dot point 1, factors that affect the ability of Parliament to make law, including the roles of the Houses of Parliament, the representative nature of Parliament, political pressures and restrictions on the law-making powers of Parliament. The roles of the Houses of Parliament. We have already looked at the roles of the Houses of Parliament, and we will now be looking at the impact these roles have on Parliament's ability to make laws. Some of the factors we need to consider when assessing how the roles of the Houses of Parliament impact Parliament's ability to make laws are the effectiveness of the lower house, a majority government, a minority government, the effectiveness of the upper house, a rubber stamp, a hostile upper house, and the law-making process. For the purpose of this revision video, however, the focus will be the effectiveness of the upper house. The effectiveness of the upper house, rubber stamp upper house. This occurs when the government has a majority in both the upper and lower house. It allows the government to introduce whatever bills it likes and implement all of its legislative program. It can limit the ability of the upper house, however, to act as a house of review as it is intended. The rubber stamp impact on lawmaking. It allows the government to reject private member bills without debate. Government bills should pass both houses and the government will be able to implement their legislative agenda as members tend to vote along party lines. And it can mean bills are passed without being adequately debated in the upper house like they would be if there was no rubber stamp upper house. Hostile upper house. This occurs when the government does not hold the majority of seats in the upper house. The opposition may block government policy for political reasons rather than because it is a bad law that's being proposed. A hostile upper house can force the government to take into account a wider range of views and make laws that better reflect community interests. And it can result in minor or micro parties holding higher levels of power. The hostile upper house impact on lawmaking. It allows the upper house to reject government bills or negotiate significant amendments to them, and allows for more thorough debate and scrutiny of bills passed by the lower house. The representative nature of Parliament. The representative nature of Parliament is based on the notion that members of Parliament will represent the views of the majority of the people, and therefore the laws made by Parliament reflect the will and values of the majority of the people. This ensures that members of Parliament listen to the views and the concerns of their constituents. If members of Parliament are not representing the views of the majority of people, they are unlikely to be re-elected. Now, this is upheld through regular elections. The federal election happens every 3 years and the state elections every 4 years. Now, regular elections allow members who are not representing the views of their constituents to be voted out ultimately. There is a problem, however, and that is that some voters may not know or may not care about what the candidates stand for and not necessarily vote for someone that represents their views. Looking at how the representative nature of Parliament helps lawmaking, the representative nature of Parliament encourages members of Parliament to listen to the views of the majority in an attempt to be re-elected. Parliament can form committees, working parties, and can ask law reform bodies such as the Victorian Law Reform Commission to prepare recommendations for legislative action that reflects the values of the community. Ultimately, when members of Parliament are not sitting, they are usually engaging with their constituents. Looking at how the representative nature of Parliament hinders lawmaking, members of Parliament may introduce and support laws that are popular with voters rather than passing more controversial laws. Members may want to avoid electoral backlash, so may refrain from introducing or being seen to support controversial laws, even if they are necessary. Political pressures. There are internal, domestic, and international political pressures. For the purpose of this video, we'll be looking at internal political pressures. We'll begin by looking at voting along party lines. Members of Parliament tend to vote according to party lines. While some may disagree with the party's stance, they are likely to feel compelled to vote in accordance with their party. This means that members of Parliament may not vote according to the views of the electorate, state, or region that they represent. Members of Parliament can cross the floor to vote against their own party. Technically, only frontbenchers are bound to party policy, and backbenchers are free to vote as they wish. However, backbenchers have a vested interest in following party lines, as they may risk their chances of being promoted to the front bench if they cross the floor. The composition of the houses. A minority government will need to negotiate with minor parties and independents to ensure bills pass the lower house. These negotiations, however, may mean that bills need to be watered down in order to be passed. A hostile upper house may mean that the government faces political pressures from the opposition and crossbench members and may need to compromise their policies in order for bills to pass. Restrictions on the lawmaking powers of Parliament. Looking at judicial limitations, Parliament can only make laws within its constitutional jurisdiction. Parliament cannot alter the Constitution to increase its jurisdiction without a successful referendum. Examples of jurisdictional limitations include that the Parliament cannot pass laws that infringe express or implied rights, or they cannot pass laws outside of their lawmaking power. Specific prohibitions. The Australian Constitution restricts the lawmaking powers of parliaments by stating a particular parliament cannot make laws in a particular area. I have included 3 examples below. Challenging the validity of legislation. Legislation can be limited by the process of judicial review if challenged before a court. If an individual, group, organisation or government believes a parliament has acted outside of its lawmaking powers, they can challenge the validity of the law in court. The court can clarify the lawmaking powers of the parliament and declare whether a law is valid. High Court decisions are fully enforceable decisions. This means that Parliament cannot override them or abrogate them through an Act of Parliament. There is a problem with taking a matter to the High Court, which we encountered in the previous video, and that is that these matters are extremely time-consuming and extremely costly, and this may deter people from challenging the validity of legislation. That concludes today's video. I hope that your knowledge of dot point 1 from Unit 4 Area of Study 2 has been consolidated. As always, if you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below or send me an email. Thank you.